I used to live in a small building downtown. One of the reasons I moved out was because of the bad neighborhood, including this guy in the apartment right over mine. He was a weird-looking fella who mostly kept to himself. Around midnight, though, there was frequently a strange noise that really got on my nerves. It wasn't all that loud, to be fair, but I'm a really light sleeper, so it was hard to keep my eyes shut with those bumping sounds going on and on. The sound was reminiscent of high heels walking about, just not quite as loud, as if the person causing the noise was actually trying to remain as quiet as possible. After a few days, I realized that the pattern was always the same, like a recording played over and over, with random intervals in between. And that went on for the best part of a year. Always the same sequence of bumps, slowly tattooed into my mind. It was only several years later, helping my daughter with her homework, that I learned a little bit about Morse code. My daughter knocked on the table with her knuckles, and a shiver immediately went down my spine as I recognized that exact pattern. When I asked her what it meant, she laughed. "That's the easiest one, Dad," she said. "It's the one they use to call for help." I stared down at the piece of white plastic in my hand, in numb horror. 2 little blue lines. 2 lines meant the test was positive. I didn't even have to look at the box to know that much. Oh God, I wasn't ready for this. Ryan, of all people, was going to be a dad. I loved him, probably more than anyone could ever love someone, and he loved me. He was my soulmate, but neither of us were ready for this. Having a baby meant growing up. It meant more responsibilities, getting married, the whole 9 yards. I fell back onto the toilet seat and just stared at the test in my hand, almost forgetting to breathe as I clutched the test harder, as if breaking the white stick would change the test results. No, neither of us were ready for this. Ryan was pretty much still a kid at heart, going drinking almost every weekend, playing video games and the likes. He wasn't ready for all that responsibility. A baby was a tiny human being, for Christ's sake. You couldn't just leave it at home to go drinking, or spend all night playing video games when you had a baby. It needed care and constant attention. There was no way Ryan or I could handle what that meant. Finally, dropping the test in the trash bin by the sink, I washed my shaking hands and stumbled into the kitchen for a glass of water to deal with the shock. Still trying to figure out how to deal with this, for Ryan's sake as much as my own. I still didn't have any clear answers as I shuffled towards the bedroom, still in a state of shock. How was I going to do this? How do you deal with something so monumental? What do you do? What do you say? My hand was shaking as I reached out and slowly opened the bedroom door. Tears rolled down my eyes. Ryan was sleeping, but he woke up as I entered the room. He had always been such a light sleeper. He ran his hand over his face in that adorable way he sometimes did when he was tired and had trouble focusing. "Daniel? What the hell are you doing in my house, man?" Ryan asked me groggily, sleep still evident in his voice, as he tried to keep whispering as to not wake the bitch sleeping next to him. I acted quickly. It was the only way. Ryan wasn't ready to have a baby with that bitch. Crossing the short distance from the door to the bed, I lifted the knife and aimed it downward, slashing the throats of Ryan and his bitch, blood staining the sheets immediately as the little family ended before it ever had the chance to begin. It hurt me more than it hurt him. To lose my soulmate, my one true love, it broke my heart, but I knew it was for the best. Ryan wasn't ready to be a dad. I just knew it. I thought I was normal. I really believed so. I was very anxious then. Usually superpowers manifest once the person turns 16. My 16th birthday had come and gone a month ago, and nothing had happened. I was also disappointed. My friends were showing off their newfound abilities, and all I could do was put on a bright smile and give a thumbs up. My mother can fly, my father can teleport, and my brother can read minds. Me? I thought I was normal, but thankfully, 2 months after I turned 16, my brother couldn't read my mind. I was kind of relieved about that, to be honest. A week later, I was having my breakfast when my dad wasn't able to teleport to work. He tried all he could, but was unsuccessful until I went upstairs to call my mom. We then realized that I had the power to neutralize the powers of others. I also realized that this only seemed to happen when those people were in my nearby circumference. To make it fair for everyone, the government had mandated that superpowers will not be used unless it was absolutely necessary. Since powers were not used on a daily basis, my neutralizing effect went mostly unnoticed. However, my parents were still concerned and booked an appointment for me with a specialist in a neighboring country. Midway during our flight, there was a breakdown which sent our plane hurtling down from the sky. One tried to float the plane, another tried to control the weather, and another tried to teleport, all in vain. My family sat in silence, with terror contorting their faces, while the plane descended into chaos. Screams were heard from all sides. My parents looked at me with resignation, but I knew what I had to do. The only way to get rid of the neutralizing effect was to get rid of the person casting it. I got a D-, and the teacher told me that nobody's perfect. I lost my hat, and my mom told me that nobody's perfect. I shattered a vase, and my grandmother told me that nobody is perfect. I've made a lot of mistakes over my life, and I have always wished I could stop. I have always wished that I could be perfect. I forgot my wallet, and my girlfriend told me that nobody is perfect. I burnt the turkey, and the visitors told me that nobody's perfect. I went over the speed limit, and the officer told me that nobody is perfect. That's right, nobody's perfect. But that doesn't mean nobody can be perfect. I will become perfect. I will get rid of all the hopeless mistakes. I dropped my popcorn, and the person next to me told me that nobody's perfect. I was late to my son's soccer match, and he told me that nobody is perfect. I broke my leg, and the doctors told me that nobody is perfect. I met an old lady on the sidewalk today. I walked her home. She grinned at me suspiciously and whispered that I had 3 wishes. I wished to be perfect. I screamed in terror, in pain, as my skin started burning off of my body, reducing into nothing. I fell to the ground, begging for help, cursing at the old lady as my entire body began to self-destruct. Coughing up quickly dissolving blood, I collapsed, motionless, my vision starting to fade as the horrific pain started to take over. And just like that, I disappeared without a trace. After all, nobody is perfect. I know this is a distasteful subject for some people, but I love porn. It is a lifesaver for me. Every night, I can turn off the light, sit at my computer in my little home office, and, well, relieve the tension. With porn, I get to see some of the world's most beautiful women in a very intimate way, with no hassles and no consequences. I am not an idiot. I know it isn't the same as a real woman, or a real relationship, for that matter, but I can never do the real thing with a real woman. I guess I'm just a victim of my own fears. People are always surprised to learn that I don't have a girlfriend, given that I am so damned good-looking. I have even been called irresistible. I always wanted to have beautiful women throw themselves at me, and I made that happen. Yet I can never follow through on those advances. I act in haste and repent, but I'll always have my porn, and the pleasure it brings me. Sometimes I like to take off all my clothes while I am touching myself, sitting in my office with my back to the door that I leave wide open on purpose. Alone in the dark, primal, carnal, naked, vulnerable, my back exposed, taunting the darkened house around me. It was the ultimate fuck you to the thing that lurks in the darkness. I agreed to follow a contract, but that thing has to follow the contract as well. And that son of a bitch can't touch me so long as I remain a virgin. The last couple of years have been enlightening, to say the least. I have learned a lot about people, about murderers, about myself. For the last few years, I have been keeping a dangerous creature locked in my house. I know people won't understand. They would try to stop me, call PETA on me or something, but they wouldn't know. That thing, it killed my wife. Nothing like that deserves to live. I have had to hide it away from other people. If it got out, I know it would just hurt people who didn't know to stay away from it. No one knows it, like I do. A year ago, the thing started speaking. Maybe it learned from me. It said things that tore into me. Sometimes I nearly gave in, but then I remembered Amanda. I remember how that thing fucking killed her. It spoke to me again today. After hearing what it said, I don't think I'm strong enough. I'm going to kill myself so I don't open that door. We are both going to die alone, just like we should. The thing said, "I'm sorry, Dad." The day I found out my husband was cheating on me, with my best friend no less, I drowned in my tears. The day after, I filed for our divorce. 2 days later, my husband begged for me to cancel it. I didn't budge. Then I told him to leave and take his belongings with him. 3 days later, I had a little talk with my best friend, convincing her that I understood. 4 days later, news came that in 3 months' time, my husband and his new girlfriend were going overseas. We never had children together, so it's not like we had to fight for custody or anything like that. 5 days later, my husband came to my house, and I had my closure. 6 days later, I invited my best friend over for dinner. She was distraught over my husband, who seemingly disappeared. I assured her that they would be together forever. Earlier this day, she still hasn't found him. She thanked me for the wonderful steak, though, and might come over for dinner again. Tomorrow, I'll tell her the truth. We bought an old house, my boyfriend and I. He is in charge of the new construction, converting the kitchen into the master bedroom, for instance, while I am on wallpaper removal duty. The previous owner papered every wall and ceiling. Removing it is brutal, but oddly satisfying. The best feeling is getting a long peel, similar to your skin when you were peeling from a sunburn. I don't know about you, but I kind of make a game of peeling, on the hunt for the longest piece before it rips. Under a corner section of paper in every room is a person's name and a date. Curiosity got the best of me one night when I Googled one of the names and discovered that the person was actually a missing person, the missing date matching the date under the wallpaper. The next day, I made a list of all the names and dates. Sure enough, each name was for a missing person, with dates to match. We notified the police, who naturally sent out the crime scene team. I overheard one of the techs say, "Yup, it's human." Human? What's human? "Ma'am, where is the material you removed from the walls already? This isn't wallpaper you were removing." I committed 7 felonies today. I committed perjury when I lied in court, saying that he was not the man responsible. I committed computer fraud when I altered the witness statements to back it up. I committed forgery when I signed a court order ensuring his immediate release. I committed burglary when I broke into his house and stole the hair ribbon from that trophy box. I committed aggravated assault when he walked into his home as a free man. I committed murder when he bled out into the gasoline-soaked carpet after screaming for hours. I committed arson when I walked from the blazing home of my daughter's killer. It all starts with holding hands. Simple, innocuous, easy. All you have to do is reach out, share a moment with the person you are simply dying to touch. Overcome trepidation and take a deep breath. Wait for the spark as your fingers entwine. There is so much you want to say, but for now, just take the first step and grab their hand. I mean, that's why it's hanging off the bed up there, right? Ever since my father died, my mother hasn't been able to get out of bed. She lays there lonely and unmoving, day in and day out, quiet, in sorrow. She's nothing like she used to be. I want to help her, but I don't know how. I told my teacher, ever since my father died, my mother hasn't been able to get out of bed. That's natural. It hasn't been that long, my teacher said to me. So I did nothing. I told our neighbor, since my father died, my mother hasn't been able to get out of bed. Just let her be. Give her some time, our neighbor said to me. So I did nothing. But every day, my mother sinks further and further into the bed. The arms are wrapped around her body and are pulling her down. They have covered her mouth now, so she can no longer scream. I let her be, but she is nearly gone now. They keep pulling her down, further and further, quiet and in terror. She lays there with her claws around her, day in and day out. My father was the only one who knew how to stop them, but he's dead now, and they won't let my mother leave the bed. This is going to be hilarious, or so I thought. As I finished dribbling, I dyed here with anti-fog liquid on the bathroom's mirror. I left the hotel room for a few minutes while I let the steam from the hot running water fill the bathroom. When I returned, the mirror read, "Me too." I have seen things that most men couldn't possibly imagine. I have seen the very corners of the galaxy, 2 solar systems colliding in a cosmic display, divine lights coating an entire atmosphere in its ethereal beauty. I have watched you all live in your happy oblivion, unaware of the secrets of the cosmos around you, aimlessly staring at the sky, trying to piece it all together. Your telescopes and satellites will never come close to fully grasping the vast spectrum of the universe. But now, I feel pity for your population, for what you will soon discover, because recently you have taken a photograph of what you call a black hole. Very soon, I will leave you to find a brand new sapient species to observe, as now that you have discovered the cave, it won't be long before you discover the beast within it. Today, I lived. For the very first time, I experienced the thrills of life, the sensation of the wind blowing over me, the feeling of adrenaline pumping through my veins, the shouts of my peers around me, the final feeling of emotion spreading through my nerves as I landed. Today, I lived for the last time. Maria sat huddled in the corner of the room for the 4th sleepless night in a row. In the opposite corner of the room stood her 5-year-old son Henry, chained to the wall, crying and reaching out for his mother. There was no doubt that he had been bitten by one of those creatures, but the transition took days before they finally turned. Maria shakily gripped the knife in her hand, forced every second to choose when what was chained to the wall was no longer Henry. I wake up in the middle of the night, panting and afraid. Shivers run down my spine. My heart beats rapidly, and I can't make it stop. Fear rips into me. I try to calm down, but I can't. My breath comes out sharply. Cold sweat erupts from my body. I want to cry out for help, but my throat refuses to make a single noise. And that's when I feel it. There's a presence in my room. I can't see it, but I know it's here. It won't leave me alone, not until it comes and takes me away. "It's okay," my grandma whispers in my ear. "You're safe, darling." Her soft and kind voice calms me down. My heart rate returns to normal. The presence in my room can no longer be felt. My grandmother fixes the sheets around me and plants a kiss on my forehead. "Good night," she says. My eyes droop shut and I fall asleep. I wake up the next morning, go down the stairs, and enter the living room. "Good morning, Grandma," I say, approaching and then kissing my grandmother's memorial photo. She passed away last year. I wake up from a dream, only to discover that someone in the house is calling my name. Groggily, I register that the voice belongs to my grandmother. I glance over at the clock beside my bed. 7 p.m. I don't really know what all the commotion is about, but it sounds like my grandmother is ascending the stairs, her voice getting closer and closer. I rub my eyes, my nap ruined. I let out an irritated, "Yeah, Grandma." The footsteps come to a halt, and my name is repeated once again, only this time it was drawn out, the pitch lowering quickly until it became an inhuman, guttural roar. I freeze in place as footsteps pound up the remaining stairs quickly, and a massive, disproportionate, long-armed figure squeezes itself through my doorway, still screaming my name as its mouth drops open to its stomach. And when I take a look into its mouth, I catch a glimpse of what remains of my actual grandmother. That thing stole her voice. Do not go looking for them. Do not venture down the dark alleyway. Though it may beckon, do not listen. Deny the unmarked door, the age-old stairway descending ever downwards into unknown Sumerian darkness. You must not let them catch you. Believe me, they will make it difficult. They will tempt you at every chance they get. Make use of every twisted ploy to lure you to your damnation. A child's cry that lights your soul on fire. The call of a fallen elderly woman. A tortured scream. A manic hammering of fists against the door. A whimper that begs, pleads for your mercy. You must not give in. For if you do, you may indeed rescue that which is trapped, but you shall also free their captors, and that will be the end of us. They had driven past 2 beaches already, each of them packed with rows of towels and swimmers, polluting the view. No parking, no shade, a line for the changing rooms longer than at a rock concert. The 3rd beach, on the other hand, was absolutely perfect. Fine sand, tall palm trees, moderate waves, plenty of shade, and plenty of sunlight. And best of all, there wasn't a single person in sight. They couldn't believe it was empty and free of obstructions. What they couldn't see was that the waves had erased the drag marks from the shore to the water. This is not a cry for forgiveness. There is no one left alive to grant such a mercy, nor should they, if there were. Everything that has happened, all of the suffering, so many meaningless deaths, it's all my fault. I made one decision, and that decision killed millions of people. Deep in my mind, I knew what would happen, but at the moment I needed to walk away, I just couldn't bring myself to do it. I should have left that man to die, but seeing him in the middle of the road among the dead, so frightened and alone, I made the decision to break quarantine. And that decision killed everyone. No one ever liked Harry when he was a little fat kid on the playground, or when he was an even fatter kid in high school. They certainly didn't like him when he dropped out to go to culinary school. No one ever would have believed you if you told them that they would worship him one day. No one knows where Harry went for a few years, but when he returned, he opened up a diner right in the center of town. Within a year, it was the only thing people talked about. Everyone ate there. Ask anyone, and they would tell you why. Harry's Diner has the best damn food. Simple as that. It really was. People loved it, ate it by the pound. Breakfast, lunch, and dinner. Harry's, Harry's, and more Harry's. It became an obsession. Some people even started setting up camps outside, just so they could be first in line for breakfast. Harry's got so popular that he put the supermarket out of business. The other restaurants closed soon after. No one was too bothered by that. Everyone who worked at those places just started eating at Harry's. That was only the beginning. People loved the food so much, they would do anything for Harry. One woman traded her firstborn son for a week of free meals. Harry made another man kill his best friend just because he could. It wasn't long before Harry had a whole army that would do anything for him, just for a taste of what he would cook up next. Nowadays, there's not much left of the town, other than Harry's, of course. All of the homes are worn and faded. The grass grows unchecked, and trash sits out at the curb. People wander the streets in a haze, waiting for their next meal. The town even gave Harry access to their tornado siren. Its wailing song signals the next feast. At night, the whole ruin of a town bathes in the neon light from the diner sign. Harry's name proudly looks down over its subjects, a whole kingdom to call his own. He deserved it. He really did have the best damn food. Simple as that. But it wasn't because of salt, pepper, or paprika. Not because of the cheese or the butter either. Not even because of the factory frozen meat he used. The secret ingredient to every delicious meal he ever made was heroin. My wife was right. Seeing her on the internet, day in and day out, was kind of irritating, taking family time away like that. Since the accident, we have been at odds about what we should do, seeking any avenue that could work, or at least placate us for the moment. She swore up and down that she would find something. Well, much to my surprise, she did. She said it works just like her onions. Spring onions, that is. She's very specific about her vegetables. You see, you can cut off the bottom of a green onion and put it in water. In a few days, it should start to grow little roots. Once it does that, you can plant it in soil and have onions in no time. It's been about a month or so now, and son of a bitch, I can attest without a doubt that it actually works. After we planted the remnants of our daughter, I started seeing her dark brown hair poke up through the soil. Soon enough, we should have a brand new Vidalia walking around. Thank God. That last one was quite the disappointment. He awoke to the huge, insect-like creatures looming over the edge of his bed and screamed his lungs out. They hastily left the room, and he stayed up all night, shaking and wondering if it had all been a dream. The next morning, there was a tap on the door. Gathering what remained of his courage, he opened it to see one of those things gently place a plate filled with fried breakfast on the floor. Bewildered and unable to say anything, he accepted the gift. The creatures chittered excitedly in response. This happened every single day for weeks. At first, he was worried that the creatures were fattening him up, but after an especially greasy breakfast that left him clutching his chest from heartburn, the creatures replaced his usual meals with fresh fruit. As well as cooking, they poured hot steamy baths for him and even tucked him in like a little baby when he went to bed. It was very bizarre. One night, He awoke to gunshots and screaming. He raced downstairs to find a decapitated burglar being devoured by the insect-like creatures. He was sickened, but he disposed of the remains as best as he could. After all, he knew they had just been protecting him. One morning, the creatures wouldn't let him leave his room. He lied down, confused but trusting as they ushered him back into bed. Whatever their motives may have been, they were not going to hurt him. Hours later, a burning pain spread throughout his body. It felt like his stomach was filled with razor wire. The insects chittered as he spasmed and moaned. It was only when he felt a terrible squirming sensation writhing beneath his skin that he realized that the insects hadn't been protecting him. They had been protecting their young inside of him. 24 hours. Yesterday, Todd made it his mission to sleep with as many women as possible. He managed a whopping 37 in just 24 hours, an insurmountable amount for an average day. But this was not an average day. Who was going to say no to some good sex without any consequences? He did not know he would soon be a father to 6 illegitimate children, or he wouldn't have done it. Yesterday, Annie snapped and slit the throat of her toxic ex-husband. The neighbors walking by witnessed the entire event through the window, but simply looked at each other, shrugged, and kept walking. Annie continued her day as usual, leaving the still warm body on her floor. She did not know she would be arrested for murder, or she wouldn't have done it. Yesterday, Lacey took her husband and kids on a drive on the winding roads next to the ocean. Her hands were shaking as she gripped the wheel, while her kids sat oblivious in the back seats. She and her husband shared a meaningful look as she jerked the car to the right and into the crashing ocean waves. She didn't know she would be shunned while laying 6 feet under, or she wouldn't have done it. Yesterday, the news was announced that an unsurvivable asteroid was headed straight for Earth. Yesterday, the world erupted into unprecedented chaos as everyone had to decide what to do with their final 24 hours. But today, utter and complete pandemonium occurred because the asteroid missed. Once upon a time, there lived a beggar with a nail embedded in his foot. He had a small puppy who went everywhere with him. The two of them were very happy together, but the nail was hurting the beggar a lot. One day, he went to the doctor to have the nail removed, but to their astonishment, it had only grown in size. The doctor told the beggar that removing the nail now would be extremely painful, so the beggar left it inside. The only problem was that the nail began to cause him more pain when he walked, and he would bleed often. To deal with this, the beggar had set his puppy down instead of carrying it, and had to watch as his poor puppy injured its feet on the rough concrete. After a month had gone by, after the first consultation, the nail grew so large it pierced into his ankle. The poor beggar was in so much pain that he couldn't walk, only shuffle, and the doctor told him that it was too late for him to remove it. The puppy's feet were also scratched and bleeding, and it was difficult for it to walk. The beggar now had to carry the puppy, and its weight caused him even more pain. I paused in my story, listening carefully. In the other room, I could still hear my husband snoring loudly. I sighed in relief. We were still safe. "Why doesn't the beggar just pull out the nail from the start, Mommy?" asked my son curiously, his wide, innocent eyes looking up at me. "And why does he carry his puppy, even though it hurts him?" I smiled at him, choking back tears as he hugged my arms. My bruises were well hidden underneath my long sleeves, and I could just manage to resist whimpering. "I don't know, sweetheart," I lied, to keep myself from breaking down. "Now please, go to sleep, okay?"